Some jobs are meant to be done alone, in the dark, when the rest of the world sleeps. But tonight, we follow a security guard who discovered that some places are never truly empty. Welcome to Midnight Chills, bedtime horror stories. Marcus had worked the night shift at St. Catherine's Medical Center for exactly 11 months when he first heard the elevator. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October 2024. The hospital was running on skeleton crew. Just him, 2 nurses on the 3rd floor, and Dr. Chen in the emergency room. The elevator shouldn't have been moving, but there it was. Ding. 2nd floor. Marcus checked his security monitors. All the cameras showed empty hallways, empty elevator, but the floor indicator kept lighting up. 2nd floor, 3rd floor, 4th floor. Then it stopped. 5th floor. The pediatric wing. Marcus had been avoiding the 5th floor for months. Not because of superstition, but because of the smell. Even with the renovations, even with the industrial cleaners, there was always that faint odor of chlorine mixed with something else. Something sweet and wrong. The 5th floor had been closed since the incident in March. 23 children from the cancer ward had been on a field trip to the hospital's therapeutic pool in the basement. The bus never made it. Black ice on Highway 401. The driver lost control. The bus went through the guardrail and into Lake Ontario. All 23 children drowned. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and radio. His hands were already shaking, and he hadn't even left the security desk yet. The 5th floor had been gutted after the accident. Too many memories, too many grieving families. The hospital decided it was easier to renovate than to keep using rooms where those children had spent their final weeks. The stairwell was darker than usual. Emergency lighting flickered weakly every few seconds. As Marcus climbed, the temperature dropped dramatically. By the 3rd floor, he could see his breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. By the 5th floor, his flashlight beam was shaking so violently he could barely see straight. The elevator doors were open. Waiting. Inside, the floor was covered in muddy footprints. Small ones, child-sized. But it wasn't mud, Marcus realized as he knelt down for a closer look. It was lake water. Dark, murky lake water that smelled like dead fish and rotting weeds. The kind of water that fills your lungs and never lets you breathe again. The footprints led from the elevator down the dark hallway toward the old children's ward. Each print was perfectly preserved, as if the children had just walked through moments before. Some prints were bare feet. Others showed the outline of small sneakers. All of them were soaking wet. Marcus keyed his radio with trembling fingers. "Control, this is Marcus. I've got a situation on 5. Static filled the airwaves, punctuated by what sounded almost like voices whispering in the background. Control, do you copy? Nothing but white noise and those strange, distant whispers that might have been his imagination. Then he heard it. Soft laughter echoing from somewhere deep in the pediatric wing. Not one child, but many. The sound of children playing, completely carefree and joyful. The kind of laughter that should have filled Marcus with warmth, but instead sent ice water through his veins. He followed the wet footprints down the corridor, his flashlight beam dancing across empty doorways. Room 512, room 514, room 516. Each door was slightly ajar, revealing nothing but darkness inside. But as he passed each room, Marcus could swear he heard sounds from within. The rustle of bed sheets, the quiet beep of medical equipment that had been disconnected months ago. The whispered conversations of children who should have been sleeping. The footprints stopped at room 518. The door was closed, but light was seeping out from underneath. Warm, yellow light like a child's nightlight. Marcus pressed his ear against the cold metal door and held his breath. Inside, he could hear them clearly now. Multiple voices. Children talking in hushed, excited tones like they were sharing secrets at a sleepover. He could make out fragments of conversation. "We've been waiting so long. He's finally here. Do you think he'll want to play with us? I hope he's nice. The last one was mean. He wouldn't play our games." Marcus turned the handle slowly. The door opened with a soft creak that seemed to echo forever in the empty hallway. The room was exactly as it had been left after the renovations. Empty. Sterile. But the hospital bed was made with fresh white sheets. A glass of water sat on the nightstand, condensation still beating on the outside. And on the pillow was a child's drawing. It was done in crayon on construction paper, the kind of artwork that usually decorated hospital walls to make the environment more cheerful. But this drawing made Marcus's stomach turn. Stick figures holding hands in a circle around a hospital bed. In the center of the bed was another stick figure, this one colored black. At the bottom of the paper, written in the shaky handwriting of a young child, were the words, "We're waiting for you, Marcus." His name. They knew his name. The sound of children giggling erupted from behind him. Marcus spun around, his flashlight cutting through the darkness of the hallway. The beam revealed dozens of small shadows moving between the doorways, dancing, playing, celebrating. But every time his light hit them directly, they vanished, only to reappear in his peripheral vision. His radio crackled to life with a burst of static. "Marcus?" It was Jenny, one of the third-floor nurses. Her voice sounded strange, though, distant and echoing, as if she were speaking from the bottom of a well. "Marcus, where are you?" "We need you down here." "I'm on 5, he whispered into the radio, afraid to speak too loudly and attract the attention of whatever was playing in the shadows. There are kids up here, kids who shouldn't be here." Silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then Jenny's voice came through again, but it was different now. Younger, higher pitched, like a child trying to imitate an adult's voice. "Come play with us, Marcus. We've been waiting so long. It's been so cold and dark since the accident. We just want someone to play with us." The voice wasn't coming from his radio anymore. It was coming from room 520, just down the hall. Marcus backed toward the elevator, but when he reached for the call button, he found that the doors had closed. The button didn't light up when he pressed it. The display showed that the elevator was stuck on the basement level, the same basement where the therapeutic pool had been, the same basement the children had been heading to when they died. The stairwell door was locked from the inside, though Marcus was certain he hadn't locked it when he came up. The handle wouldn't turn no matter how hard he pulled. He was trapped on the 5th floor with whatever was pretending to be those dead children. "We know you, Marcus." This time it was clearly a boy's voice coming from room 522. "We've been watching you on your rounds every night for months, walking past our rooms when we were still here. You never stopped to say hello. You never asked how we were feeling. That's not very nice, is it?" "That's not very nice at all," agreed a girl's voice from room 524. "We were scared sometimes, when the treatments hurt, when we couldn't sleep because of the pain. We could see you walking by our doors, but you never came in." "We just want to play," said another boy from room 526. His voice had a strange quality to it, like he was speaking through water. "Just one game. We know lots of games." "Just one game," echoed a little girl from room 528. Her voice was equally distorted, as if her lungs were filled with something other than air. Marcus realized with growing horror that he recognized some of these voices. During his 11 months at the hospital, he had walked these halls countless times. These children had been patients here. Real patients with real names and real families who had loved them. Children who had been fighting for their lives while he had walked past their rooms, focused only on his security rounds, never stopping to acknowledge their existence. Now they wanted acknowledgement. Now they wanted attention. Now they wanted to play. Marcus started running toward the far end of the hall, desperate to find another exit. But with each step, the hallway seemed to stretch longer. Room numbers climbed higher than they should have. 530, 532, 534, 536. Rooms that had never existed, in a section of the hospital that should have ended at room 528. Behind him, the children's voices grew louder and more excited. They were no longer trying to sound friendly. There was something predatory in their tone now, like cats who had been playing with a mouse and were finally ready to pounce. "Red light!" The command came from multiple voices in unison, echoing off the walls with supernatural force. Marcus froze mid-stride, some primal instinct telling him that movement would be very, very bad. "Green light," they called, and he ran as fast as he could down the impossibly long hallway. "Red light!" He stopped so abruptly that he nearly fell forward. This continued for several terrifying minutes. Red light, green light, red light, green light. Each time he was forced to stop, Marcus could hear them getting closer, their wet footsteps squelching against the linoleum floor, their quiet giggles growing louder and more numerous. During one green light phase, Marcus risked a glance over his shoulder. They were there, all of them. Dozens of children in various stages of medical treatment. Some wore hospital gowns that clung to their small frames like wet shrouds. Others still had IV tubes attached to their arms, the lines trailing behind them like umbilical cords connecting them to machines that no longer existed. Many showed the obvious signs of their cancer treatments: bald heads, surgical scars, the pallor of children who had spent too much time indoors fighting for their lives. But it was their eyes that made Marcus's blood freeze. They were completely black. Not just the pupils, but the entire eye. Black as lake water at midnight, black as the bottom of a drowning pool. All of them were smiling with genuine childlike joy, as if this were the best game they had ever played. "Red light," they called in unison. Marcus stopped, but this time he had been moving when they called it. In the traditional game of red light, green light, Players who move during a red light are eliminated. But Marcus had never learned what elimination meant in the version these children played. "You moved," said a little girl with pigtails that dripped constantly with lake water. "You moved during red light." Her voice held no anger, only the matter-of-fact tone of a child explaining rules to a newcomer. "Now you have to stay," said a boy with bandages over his eyes that were soaked through with something darker than water. "Now you get to play with us forever. We have so many games to teach you." Marcus tried to scream, but no sound came out. His throat felt like it was filled with water, like he was drowning on dry land. The children stepped closer and he could smell them now. Chlorine and lake water and the sweet, sick smell of flowers left too long in stagnant water. Funeral flowers, the kind that had filled the hospital chapel during the memorial service for the 23 children who had died in the bus accident. Marcus suddenly remembered that memorial service. He had been working that day, had seen the families filing into the chapel. He had heard the crying, the eulogies, the songs. But he hadn't gone in. It wasn't his place, he had told himself. He was just security. Just someone who walked the halls at night. The grief of those families wasn't his burden to bear. But now, looking at these children who had been real, who had been loved, who had suffered and died, Marcus understood that their deaths had become his burden, whether he had wanted it or not. His job had been to protect this place, to keep watch over it during the vulnerable hours of the night. But he had failed to protect the most vulnerable people of all. "We remember you, Marcus," said a boy whose hospital bracelet was still attached to his thin wrist. "You walked past our rooms every night for months while we were dying. You saw our families crying in the hallways. You heard us calling for help when the pain was too bad to sleep. But you never stopped. You never cared." "We were so scared," added a girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. "So scared and so alone. All we wanted was for someone to care that we existed, someone to acknowledge that we mattered." Marcus wanted to explain that it hadn't been his job to comfort patients, that he had been hired to watch for intruders, to check doors and windows, to make sure the building was secure. But even as he formed these excuses in his mind, he knew how hollow they sounded. These children hadn't needed a security guard. They had needed someone to see them as human beings, someone to care about their fear and pain and loneliness. "Now it's your turn to be scared," said the little girl with pigtails. "Your turn to be alone. Your turn to want someone to care." The children began to close the circle around Marcus, their wet footsteps creating a symphony of squelching sounds on the linoleum floor. As they got closer, Marcus could see that their skin had the pale, bloated appearance of bodies that had been underwater too long. Their hospital gowns clung to them like seaweed. Water dripped constantly from their hair, their clothes, their fingertips, creating spreading puddles on the floor. "But we're not going to ignore you the way you ignored us," said the boy with bandages over his eyes. "We're going to play with you forever and ever." "Won't that be fun?" The circle tightened. Marcus could feel the cold radiating off their waterlogged bodies, could smell the lake water that had filled their lungs, could hear the wet, labored sound of their breathing, as if they were still drowning with every breath they took. "Come swim with us, Marcus," whispered a dozen voices in unison. "Come down to the pool in the basement. The water's perfect, nice and cold. You'll never want to leave." Marcus felt his feet moving without his permission, drawn toward the stairwell that had somehow unlocked itself. The children surrounded him as he walked, their cold, wet hands occasionally brushing against his arms and back, leaving damp handprints on his uniform. As they descended the stairs, Marcus could hear water, not dripping, but flowing, the sound of a large body of water lapping against concrete edges. But that was impossible. The therapeutic pool had been drained and filled in months ago after the accident. It no longer existed. The basement level was flooded, not with clean water, but with the dark, murky water of Lake Ontario, water that smelled of fish and weeds and death. The therapeutic pool had somehow returned, larger than it had ever been, stretching back into shadows that seemed to go on forever. The children lined up along the edge of the pool, their black eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting like a dozen tiny mirrors. They were no longer holding hands. Instead, they were reaching toward Marcus with waterlogged fingers that looked more like tentacles than human appendages. "Your turn to join the field trip, Marcus," said the little girl with pigtails. "Your turn to take a ride on the bus that never stops. Don't worry, we'll all be together, forever and ever and ever." Marcus tried to run, but his feet slipped on the wet floor. He fell forward, and the last thing he saw before hitting the water was dozens of children's faces looking down at him with expressions of pure joy. They had found someone new to play with, someone who would never ignore them again. The water was impossibly cold and dark. As Marcus sank, he could see the children diving in after him, their movements graceful and practiced, like they had been swimming in this water for months. They surrounded him in the darkness, taking his hands, guiding him deeper into the pool that seemed to have no bottom. "Don't struggle," whispered the boy with bandages over his eyes. "It only hurts for a little while. Then you get to play forever." Marcus's lungs filled with water, and as consciousness faded, he could hear the children laughing with genuine happiness. They had been so lonely, so forgotten. But now they had a new friend, someone who would never leave them, someone who would never walk past their rooms without stopping to say hello. The next morning, the day shift security guard found Marcus's flashlight and radio on the 5th floor, along with a series of wet footprints that led from the elevator to room 518 and back again. But Marcus was nowhere to be found. The hospital administration assumed he had quit without notice. It happened sometimes with night shift workers. The isolation and stress could get to people. They replaced him within a week. But sometimes when the new security guard makes his rounds on particularly quiet nights, he can hear sounds from the 5th floor. Children laughing and playing games. And occasionally, he hears an adult voice mixed in with theirs. A man's voice calling out numbers in what sounds like a game of hide and seek. "Ready or not, here I come," the voice calls. But it never sounds like the man is having fun. It sounds like he's crying, like he's begging, like he's trying to warn someone about something terrible that's about to happen. The therapeutic pool in the basement has been filled in with concrete. But on certain nights when the temperature drops and the building settles, you can still hear water lapping against invisible edges, still smell chlorine mixed with lake water, still hear the distant sound of children playing in water that should no longer exist. Some games never end. Some players never get to go home. And some field trips last forever. If you ever work the night shift in a place where children have died, remember to acknowledge them. Say hello when you pass their rooms. Ask how they're feeling. Show them that you care about their existence. Because the dead have very long memories, and they never forget the people who pretended they didn't matter. This was Midnight Chills, bedtime horror stories. Sweet dreams. And remember, someone is always watching.